You know what's interesting about people with extremely high IQs? They rarely look the way we expect them to. Most people picture someone with a very high IQ as obviously impressive, constantly confident, solving complex problems out loud, and making sure everyone in the room is fully aware of their intelligence. But psychology research consistently tells a very different story. Many of the behavioral patterns most commonly found in people with extremely high IQs don't look like intelligence at all. And some of them actually look like the exact opposite. What cognitive psychologists have found after decades of studying highly intelligent individuals is that a very high IQ doesn't just make a person smarter. It changes the entire way a person processes the world. And that difference shows up in very specific, very recognizable ways. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the 11 psychological traits that research consistently finds in people with extremely high IQs. By decoding these patterns, you'll discover why a sharper mind can often feel like a heavier burden. Before we break down the first sign, where do you think you fall on this cognitive spectrum? Drop an 88 inches in the comments right now if you often feel misunderstood because of how your mind works. Or comment 99 if your thinking patterns feel well aligned with the people around you. Let's see how many deep thinkers are tuning in today. Sign 1. They spend a lot of time alone. The first trait is a powerful preference for solitude. Highly intelligent people often spend significant amounts of time alone. Not because they dislike other human beings, but because their brains are constantly processing complex data. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for complex reasoning, planning, and deep reflection, tends to function most effectively in quiet environments without external distraction. For a high IQ brain, solitude isn't loneliness, it's fuel. Research published by the London School of Economics found something that seems counterintuitive at first. Highly intelligent individuals reported significantly lower life satisfaction from frequent social interaction compared to people with average IQs. This is tied to the Savanna theory of happiness. Intelligent minds adapt faster to modern, isolated environments. They recharge from stillness. Social interaction is engaging, but it is cognitively expensive for a brain that is always analyzing every layer of what's happening in a room. Sign 2, their minds never fully switch off. People with very high IQs frequently report that their thinking doesn't stop, not during rest, not late at night, and not during activities that most people find relaxing. There's always a background process running, turning over a problem, building a theory, or running mental simulations for things that haven't happened yet. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski described this through his theory of positive disintegration as psychomotor overexcitability, a restless internal energy that expresses itself mentally rather than physically, a drive to think that doesn't have an off switch. Neuroscientist Rex Young's research at the University of New Mexico found that higher intelligence is associated with richer connectivity between distant regions of the brain, not just faster processing in isolated areas. The highly intelligent brain makes connections across a massive network of ideas simultaneously all the time. That constant connectivity is what makes cognitive rest so difficult. Sign 3. They feel things more deeply than they show. There's a widespread cultural assumption that high intelligence comes with emotional detachment, the cold, rational thinker who lives entirely in the mind. But psychology research directly contradicts this picture. People with significantly elevated IQs actually tend to feel things with greater intensity than average, not less. Dabrowski identified this as emotional overexcitability, a heightened responsiveness to emotional stimuli that makes high IQ individuals acutely sensitive to beauty, music, injustice, and the suffering of others. A study published in the journal Intelligence found that higher measured IQ correlated with significantly greater emotional reactivity and emotional depth, particularly in response to art, moral questions, and human behavior. The reason this trait is so often invisible is that highly intelligent people also tend to be very good at regulating their outward expressions, keeping the storm contained inside longer than necessary. Sign 4, they're comfortable saying, "I don't know." The fourth trait is intellectual humility. This surprises people because we tend to assume high intelligence produces high confidence, but psychology research consistently shows the opposite pattern. People with very high IQs are far more likely to acknowledge the limits of their knowledge than people with average IQs, and they do it genuinely, not as a social performance. This connects directly to the Dunning-Kruger effect, the well-documented finding that lower competence often produces overconfidence because a person doesn't know enough to see the complexity that exists in a domain. Highly intelligent people understand that complexity intimately. They've thought deeply enough to see how much remains genuinely uncertain. So when a high IQ person says, "I don't know," it's not hesitation, it's precision. The person who holds every opinion with absolute certainty, regardless of evidence, is almost never the most intelligent person in the room. Sign 5. They struggle to find people who think at their level. This is a trait that highly intelligent people rarely talk about openly, but research shows is nearly universal among them. They find it genuinely difficult to find people they can fully connect with intellectually. This doesn't happen because they believe they're superior. It's because conversations that don't go deep enough leave them feeling a very specific kind of unstimulated. Psychologist Lita Hollingworth, who spent decades studying highly gifted adults, identified what she called stimulus poverty, the exhausting experience of a sharp mind that can't find sufficient challenge or depth in its immediate environment. What she observed wasn't arrogance. It was a quiet longing for real conversation, for someone who could follow them all the way to the bottom of an idea without needing to turn back. The result is that highly intelligent people sometimes appear aloof. They've learned from experience that most conversations aren't built to hold the depth they require. So, they calibrate themselves down, and a lot of who they actually are never enters the room at all. Sign 6. They change their minds when the evidence changes. The sixth trait is cognitive flexibility. Highly intelligent people tend to treat beliefs as working theories rather than fixed identities. When new information appears that directly contradicts what they previously believed, their brain immediately updates the model. They don't experience changing their mind as a threat to who they are. They experience it as accuracy. In cognitive psychology, this flexibility is one of the most consistent markers of advanced problem-solving ability. The brain of a highly intelligent person isn't attached to being right about any specific thing. It's purely interested in having the most accurate possible picture of reality. Sign 7. They observe far more than they say. Highly intelligent people often default to watching before speaking. They listen to what isn't being said as much as to what is. They pick up on the hidden patterns in social dynamics before they contribute anything. Research on social intelligence consistently shows that higher IQ correlates with greater accuracy in reading social cues. But it also means high IQ individuals often need more time to process what they're observing before they respond. They're not slower thinkers, they're gathering more data first. The quiet, observing person is frequently assumed to have the least to contribute. In reality, they're often the one with the most complete picture of what's actually happening. Sign 8. They procrastinate hardest on the work that matters most. Highly intelligent people often find this deeply confusing about themselves. The projects with the most personal meaning are frequently the hardest to begin. Let's check in on these signs. Do you find yourself staying quiet to gather data or struggling to find anyone who wants to discuss deep topics? Drop an 88 below if you frequently experience stimulus poverty and feel intellectually lonely in social settings. Or leave a 99 if you have a great group that completely matches your mental depth. Let's look at the reality of our community. Smaller, lower stakes tasks get done with absolute ease. The work that could genuinely represent their full capabilities seems to live permanently at the edge of starting. Researchers studying high cognitive ability individuals found that this pattern isn't laziness. It's a form of what they called complexity awareness. Before beginning a significant piece of work, a high IQ brain comprehends the full, massive scope of what excellent would require. It anticipates every single flaw the finished product might contain, and every way it could fall short of the perfect standard the mind can already clearly see. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research identified this as particularly common in gifted individuals. It is a fear, not of failure exactly, but of the gap between internal vision and external output. The procrastination isn't an absence of care. It's the presence of too much of it. The work that never starts is almost always the work that matters the most. Sign 9. They get bored faster than almost anyone around them. Highly intelligent people tend to habituate quickly, meaning they need more novel input to maintain the same level of engagement that most people get from familiar routines. At a neurological level, the stimulus that satisfied yesterday doesn't satisfy at the same level today. Neuroscientific research has linked higher cognitive ability to higher baseline dopamine activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reward system for new information and intellectual challenge. When that challenge disappears, the signal drops sharply. The restlessness isn't a mood. It's a physiological response to insufficient stimulation. This is why highly intelligent people often pursue multiple interests simultaneously, change careers, or find themselves strangely dissatisfied in comfortable situations. The brain isn't being ungrateful. It's running a search for what it was built to find. Sign 10. They question themselves more than anyone would expect. The 10th trait is persistent self-doubt, and this one is directly connected to intelligence, not opposed to it. People with very high IQs often experience a degree of internal uncertainty that the people around them would find hard to believe. Not performative, humility, genuine, recurring doubt about whether their thinking is reliable. Because they understand complexity too well to feel entirely certain about anything. The deeper your understanding of a subject, the more accurately you can see everything you don't know. Intelligence produces a more precise map of how much territory remains unexplored. Psychologist Albert Ellis observed that highly intelligent individuals were frequently the most prone to holding their own output to an impossible standard, treating any gap between performance and potential as evidence of fundamental inadequacy. The doubt isn't a sign of lesser intelligence, it's often the most reliable signature of a greater one. Which leads to sign 11. They carry a quiet sense of not quite belonging. This is the trait that ties all the others together. Highly intelligent people frequently report a quiet but persistent sense of not quite fitting in their social groups, their professions, or the world at large. Not a dramatic alienation, a subtle, ongoing awareness of being slightly out of sync with the immediate environment around them. This isn't a personality disorder. It's the predictable result of experiencing the world at a different level of resolution than most of the people around you. When your brain processes more, connects more, feels more intensely, and requires more depth than the environment consistently offers, a mild sense of displacement is almost inevitable. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, whose research on exceptional minds remains foundational, found that individuals with the greatest intellectual capacity almost universally described their inner lives as the most complex and the hardest to share. Not because they were uniquely suffering, but because they were experiencing life at a level of detail that most people around them weren't. And living at that resolution changes what you notice, what you need, and what ordinary life is capable of giving you. All of these traits are consistently misread by the world. The person who needs solitude looks antisocial. The one whose mind never stops looks anxious. The one who doubts themselves looks uncertain. But sometimes, what looks like a collection of difficulties is actually a mind that was built to go further than most environments allow. At its core, a very high IQ isn't just about thinking faster, it's about experiencing the full complexity of the world with very little filter. And that is what makes it both the most powerful and the most demanding thing a person can carry. If this video described you today, leave a comment with the number 88 if you carry that quiet sense of not belonging, or drop a 99 if you found your perfect place. Read through the replies to see that you are never as alone as your mind tells you. Hit that like button, subscribe to Turnwiser so you won't miss our next deep dive. Goodbye, and see you next time.